What's going on, everyone? How are you today? It's Tuesday. The week is trucking along, and we are here to talk to someone pretty great. I've had the pleasure of meeting Keri multiple times over the past couple of years. I actually was just on her new show, Deprogrammed, with Keri Smith, and we had a lovely conversation, and I'm looking forward to continuing that. But with me today is Keri Smith. Welcome to the show, Keri. How are you today?
Hi, Adam. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Of
Do you have
course.
a name for your audience? Are they like the Crigler critters
Uh,
or
or the Crigler the Adams family,
Oh, the Adams
maybe.
family. Oh, duh. That's
That
better.
works.
Yeah.
Yeah, chat. Actually, that's a pretty good question. Is there something that I mean, Adams family? It kind of works. That's what I called my Discord channel. Um,
It's a
but
pretty clever name.
it's pretty good, right? The Adams
Yeah.
family. I mean, I kind of dig it. That's we'll just go with that for now,
Well, hello,
tentatively.
Adams
Like,
family.
yeah. My chat's fantastic, but the Kriggers. That's funny. The Kriggle knots. That's not bad, King Kenneth. Yeah, I like that. We're called the Kriglets. I mean, seems like
No.
everyone has their own name for the UFO crew. I dig that too. That's pretty good. Darth Jason said that. But anyway, welcome to the show. Today we're going to be discussing kind of your journey. You've had a fairly long journey throughout. I don't want to say the political spectrum, the ideological spectrum. It would be more
Yes.
accurate, right?
That's more
Um,
accurate.
right. So you were a raging SJW
Uh,
for
yes.
for 20 years. I believe you said 20 years, right?
Sounds like a very long infection. And
Uh,
yes. Raging.
I mean, kind of accurate, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's not wrong.
Yeah.
So tell us about that. Let's hear, like, how did you become an SJW? Because it's almost like you're not born as an SJW. It's almost like you're
No.
indoctrinated into it. Pretty much every time I see anyone that is like that, they were brought into it somehow, right?
Yeah, it's so I've told the story before a few times now. The shortest version is that when I went to school over 20 years ago to age myself, I went to Duke University, which was a great school,
Mm-hmm.
but it was also inundated with social justice, even in the late 90s.
Wow.
And yeah, so back then it wasn't mainstream. It wasn't part of, you didn't see corporations speaking woke, you didn't see mainstream politicians speaking woke, but at the university level, that's where you would encounter it. And so that's where I encountered it. I was a science major, but I was a women's studies minor. And so,
Mm.
as part of my women's studies minor, I was taking queer theory and critical race theory courses, and
In the late
um,
90s.
in the late 90s, yes.
Wow. I didn't
And
think it
it's,
went back that far, but
oh, yeah, it goes back even further. It's just that's when it started to have some prominence at the university level.
yeah.
And so I started picking up all of this stuff that was sort of the way it's presented to you. It's not as if they're telling you, come join our cult, like, or
Right.
it's not like this is a belief system. Would you like to join? It's just presented as an extension of liberalism. It's
Okay.
presented as progressivism,
Yeah, yeah.
and it sells itself in a very positive way. So there are some ideologies that are racist, like white supremacy, that explicitly tells you, they're like, we believe white people are the best, and it's up, white people are up here, and the best way to look at the world is as to judge people on the basis of group identity, and they tell you explicitly what they are.
Yeah.
Social justice doesn't do that. It does judge people on identity group. It is racist, but it sells itself as the opposite of what it is, which is pretty familiar probably to a lot of people currently with the world events going on. Up is down, down is up.
Yeah.
But social justice is the king of that. It's like, this is an ideology that's all about ending oppression and ending racism and ending sexism and homophobia. And you get a lot of people, the ones who are well intentioned, there are a lot of people with bad intentions in it. But there
Yeah.
are also a lot of well intentioned people, especially young people, who get pulled in because it sells itself as a way to end the very things that it promotes.
Right. And by the way, if you're going to be part of this club, you have to adhere to the fact that people should be segregated by their race, their gender,
Right.
their like all of these things, and it's like, well, anyone with logic, like a logic-based brain, would be like, but you're all of these things. You're
Yeah.
telling me we're fighting it, but that's what you are. You're promoting that.
Yeah,
Um,
but it does that slowly. It's that the frog in the boiling pot
yeah,
kind of metaphor. It's they pull you in slowly, and the way I've had a lot of time in the past couple of years to think about how this is done and how is it that you get well-intentioned people to go along with evil belief systems or with you know to fight for their own oppression or the oppression of others. And I think part of it is that much like a cult, they're very focused on language because
yeah,
if they can control language, then they can control the way you think. And
mm,
if they control the way they think, they keep you from using logic to sort of say, "Ooh, this is sort of the way we're behaving or the way we're being told to behave is the opposite of what we say we're doing." And so they do that by changing definitions, and that's one of the first things you'll learn when you start to get pulled into it is they have a whole evolving list. They're always updating it of words that are problematic and words you can't say. They also come up with new definitions for words. So one of the first things I learned when I started getting pulled into it was that the definitions for racism and sexism that are no longer valid, and racism is now prejudice plus power, and sexism is now prejudice plus power. And so what they're doing, it's really clever because what they're doing that is they're getting you to over time start to believe that racism is dependent on the person who holds the race of the person who holds the prejudice or the race of the
right.
person they're prejudiced against, which is not true.
Well, that's why only white people can be racist, right? Isn't
Right.
that
That's what
essentially
they
what they're
teach.
saying?
Yes.
Because they're also teaching that white people are the people that are like
Have the
it's
power.
well, not only have the power, it's like they're basically saying and teaching these people that white people are better. That like, well, they
Yes.
they're better, and it's like, well, you're the only people that are with these thoughts of that white people in general are just simply better. It's like that's insane to think about
Yeah, they
to the
actually
logical mind, anyway.
to the logical mind, but they short circuit logic.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And what you're pointing out, Adam, is true. They actually have a lot in common with white supremacists because they both teach that the best way to look at the world is as a competition for power among identity groups.
Right.
They both teach that you should look at a person's race and judge and treat them based on their race, not on who they are as a person. And they both in a weird way they both put, like you just pointed out, white people up here. They're both saying white people are up here. The difference is that social justice people say, but we want to change where white people are at. But they're still enforcing that white
Right.
people are, as you're saying, superior in some way. They attribute all of these values to whiteness, like the Smithsonian. They were attributing, meritocracy, hard
Timeliness.
work, timeliness, being on time,
Right.
uh, individualism, all these different qualities and traits. They're saying these are white. That's
Mhm.
really messed up. That's very racist.
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, so it's sort of that horseshoe, and the horseshoe theory, where it's
Yep.
like you go so far around instead of ideology sort of being this linear spectrum, and you've got these things that are very far apart. It might more accurately look like a horseshoe where they come to meet each other at the
Mm-hmm.
bottom, and they come pretty close to meeting each other in a lot of
Yeah.
ways.
So you fell into it at Duke. And,
Yes.
and so what happened on that journey? Did you kind of make your women's studies your main? What were you studying? What was your main sciences that you
Yeah,
said?
my major was biological anthropology and anatomy
Right.
with a
Okay.
focus on primatology, and I became the thing about this ideology or this belief system is, I think probably like a lot of cults, it becomes your primary method, your primary view of the world. and it
Yeah.
becomes more important than everything else. And you can see this as social justice moves into entertainment. You know, the social justice message becomes more important than entertaining people. As it moves into
Yep.
corporations, it becomes more important than making money. So it sort of it creeps in, and then it becomes the primary driving force. If it moves into your church, it becomes more important than the gospel. And so in my life and in what I was studying, I started to view everything through this social justice lens.
Yeah.
And over time, I even lost my interest in working in biological anthropology. I went to Tanzania my senior year, and I was there to do a
Cool.
project with colobus monkeys. But
Cool.
I was cool. But as I was there, I'm looking at everything through this social justice lens, because by then I had been in it for 4 years and was pretty far along. And so everything I was observing, I kind of was thinking,
It was tainted.
it was tainted. It was like, oh, look at us white Westerners coming in and thinking that we have anything to offer or contribute or talk about conservation, or, you know, it's this sort of this, it makes a lot of people come to have a lot of self-loathing.
Yeah.
And I think it kills joy. It kills your joy in anything, because there's sort of a lot of social reinforcements within it, where if you see people celebrating something or having a great interest in something, but they're not constantly bringing in, you know, let's talk about how LGBT people are oppressed in primatology or whatever. If you're not
Yeah.
constantly bringing it into the field, then
Mhm.
they're saying you're not using your privilege for good, and so they
Or,
rob
or you're
you.
perpetuating the oppression that white people
Yes.
are, forcing on everyone just by simply existing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Wow. Okay.
so I stayed with it though. After that, even I left. I ended up working in entertainment for about 15 years in Los
Oh, wow.
Angeles. Yeah,
What
so
were you doing?
I was a comedy manager and producer.
Okay.
And so towards the end of my time in that career, I had my own management company. My partner and I represented comedians, she represented musicians, and I had started repping almost exclusively social justice comedians. So I was trying to do what a lot of social justice people get programmed to do, which is to go out in the world and spread this belief system. And whatever your career is, whether it's
Yeah.
entertainment or journalism or tech, or they're all pushing it. I was pushing it. And so one of the TV shows I sold was called Totally Biased with W. Kamau Bell on FX. It was a very explicitly social justice. It wasn't just left leaning like a lot of the late night shows had been up until that
Hmm.
point. It was more than left leaning. It was explicitly social justice. And we were doing bits about why Apu was problematic and racist, why
This was comedy, though?
it was supposed to be.
Was it funny at all? Like, were people laughing? I'm
They were
curious.
doing, that's a good question. They were doing clapter a lot, you know, which is what they're like, I agree with everything you're saying. It's like
Yeah.
preaching to the
Cool. I'm
converted.
being lectured
Yeah.
right now.
Some of it was funny. Even now I look back, I'm trying to look at it objectively and say, well, has leaving that belief system altered my view? And I will say some of it, like Kamal, he was legit funny. He is legit funny. But
Okay.
the last show I sold before I left entertainment was his show that's still currently on CNN, United Shades of America, and that is
Okay.
way off the rails in terms of being explicitly social justice. Like
Yeah.
my journey in around 2016 is when I started waking up and questioning everything. But what I saw happen at that point, and that was sort of an acceleration point for the belief system, I think, where it got upped, you know, into mainstream, and that caused a lot of people who were in it, like myself, to start to notice the internal contradictions and to question it. And I ended up leaving. It's been a long process, and I've met others who've left a lot since I started doing Deprogrammed. And but then there were others who went further in. Isn't that crazy about an acceleration point? I think it either causes you to double down
Yeah.
or have this great reckoning with not just one or two beliefs, but with your entire foundation of belief.
Yeah. Yeah. Cognitive dissonance is really strong in a lot of people.
Yeah.
And thinking about, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I would watch last week tonight with John Oliver, first thing that comes to my mind, and I would think he was funny, right? And I would laugh at some of his jokes because I believed the things that he was talking about were real, like were true. When now I'm finding out that it was actually based on like the game of telephone that is purposefully skewed in a certain bias. And by the time it got to him, he would tell it as though it was real and then make a joke about that. And the joke was actually funny, but the news was not real, right?
Exactly.
And it's
Yeah.
like that's just one example, but that happens so much. So as you said, it's almost like they're trying to get into everything. You were in comedy, and it's now at this point where it's just over the top. Everything it's overflowing, and if you talk against it, they just use you as an example of the enemy. See,
Yes.
we have another example of this person who's trying to uphold white supremacy. I've actually been called a white power activist. Like
I've been called similar.
I,
Yeah.
I it's shocking to me. I'm like, that's insane. You clearly have never heard me talk at all.
Yeah.
Period. It's just these they don't even
It,
care though, you know?
they
It's
don't
like,
care.
nah, you're in this bracket. You don't believe this one thing that I believe, so clearly you don't believe anything else I believe. Um yeah, it's
Yeah, well, you mentioned John Oliver. So after our show, Totally Biased, was canceled,
mhm.
we had a pretty unique writers' room in that they allowed us to hire a lot of first-time writers, comedians who were first-time TV writers, and they were all friends of my client, the host, and most of them, and they were all explicitly social justice. And
Not
so we
surprising.
had the most woke writers' room, and then a lot of them, after we were canceled, went to work for John Oliver.
Ha!
And I was like, oh, that
That
show's
doesn't
about to
surprise me.
get really woke.
Does not
Yeah.
surprise me. What how many years ago was that?
So it was probably 2012 when we were canceled. We were on
Yep.
for like a year and a half, 2 years maybe.
Mhm. Now, John Oliver does have some of his moments, like when he's uh, breaking down big pharma and like the opioid crisis.
Hmm.
Like, there's certain things that I'm like, all right, I still remember getting a good value from that show, but those were few and far between. You know, as far as like his very pushing of biases of certain things.
Yeah.
Um, you know, the anti-Trump rhetoric. Once Trump got elected, like I wasn't political ever, never in my life. I never was political, and it wasn't until 2020 where I was like, oh man, I should be political. Everyone should be political. Everyone should know what's happening. Um, I mean, politics and SJW culture were separate. Like you said, in the late 90s, it wasn't a mainstream conversation in the political realm.
Right. And then they married.
But now, well, when did that happen? When, was it 2012, 2013?
I
That felt like a shift there.
There was a shift. It probably started earlier than when I noticed it, but I didn't notice it until the 2016.
Yeah.
And that's when I first heard a political candidate for president, Hillary Clinton, using the term implicit bias, which was
Mm.
that's an explicitly social justice term. And
Explain
I'm
that to
saying
us. Explicit bias.
implicit bias. So they say that much like original sin, see, in a lot of ways it's like a religion. They say that you're born with this implicit, this born-in
Mm.
prejudice, and that if you're white, you have this implicit bias in this prejudice, this racism in everything that you do. So, unlike original sin, they don't. They believe you're born with varying degrees of bias.
Oh my
So
gosh.
your privilege. Privilege is similar. So based on your race or your sex or your sexuality, you're going to have a different degree of privilege or marginalization. And for them, it functions a lot like, well, a lot like sin.
Yeah.
But that was the first time I'd ever heard a major candidate using that phrase. And the funny thing is, I had been in it for so long, and I was a true believer, and I believed this ideology is doing good in the world. But I wanted it to go mainstream when I was
Yeah.
younger. I don't think I ever thought it would. And then to hear it coming out of the mouth of Clinton, and I was trying to figure out whether to vote for her or not. At that point, I had always voted Democrat.
Okay.
And there was something about her, though, and there was something about the things I was waking up to about my belief system that I just couldn't. I ended up, I couldn't vote, I couldn't cast my ballot for her. And
Well, she is a terrible person. So, you know, your core instincts were like, there's something about this woman I just don't trust.
yeah,
She is kind of terrible. So,
I'm sorry. I think my light went out. Is that okay? Can we? Is this
it doesn't bother me at all. You
okay?
don't,
Good.
you know, it did. I saw it got a little dimmer, but
All
this,
of a sudden, I
so
was like, "What?"
yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, you know what that is with her. Here, I've thought about it a lot since then. I think that she is. I think she has a personality disorder, and
Hmm.
sometimes people with those uh, disorders, it's there's something innate in you that gets triggered. You're at a gut level,
Yeah.
and you don't really know what it is, and intellectually you can't put your finger on it. But it's like when Jordan Peterson talks about how baby monkeys know to be afraid of a snake. They don't know why. They may have never seen a snake before, but they know to be afraid of one. That's the gut reaction I had to her, and I was like trying to get over it and get past it. And say, I don't know why I feel this way. I need to still vote for her because I had at that point I still believed I was still in the cult. I
Yeah.
had just started questioning things, and I believed Trump was a demagogue, and I believed he was gonna ruin the world. And so I really, that whole guilt that they do of like, you have to vote Democrat, otherwise this other person's going to get in. That was working on me, and I was really trying to do it, but still, my body was like, "She's a snake."
It's
Like,
I like that though, that the comparison, the analogy there is accurate. She is a snake. There's poison in her fangs,
yeah,
and I wouldn't trust her. Some people are actually hoping that she runs because of how many people just hate her. I mean, even Democrats, just you, for example, what your whole entire situation, you were indoctrinated. You were in the mindset still and still couldn't vote for her.
couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
I decided in the end, I had voted for Bernie in the primaries that year,
Yeah.
and I decided in the end I was going to vote for Jill Stein. I went back and forth a long time, and then, but I had just moved to Texas, and so I didn't send my absentee ballot in on time. So that was the first time it didn't
Mm.
actually count.
That
And
so that term, implicit bias, it it just makes me think of all the videos that were floating around of, little kids, mixed race, hugging each other and like playing together. Or there's this one picture of, a little black girl and a little white girl wearing the same um, Elsa dress. I think it's Elsa, the princess from Frozen.
hmm
Uh, and they were, look, Daddy, like I found my twin. Right? They don't see race. They just see another young human being, just like them, wearing something similar. So they must have similar interests. It's like I can understand that a child will see its parents as the only thing it knows from er, being born to they start being influenced by other people in their lives, but they see what they know as their caretakers. So something different will be interesting, like to them, like, oh, that's, you look different than my parents or than anyone else I've seen. So there's maybe like that I can understand might be seen, but that's just them trying to take in more information, right? Because
yeah,
really you become who you are by experiencing things in life. um but racism is taught. All these
totally.
things, they're absolutely taught. Like, you have to be told, oh, that person, they're different because of their skin color. Like that, when you have ideologies that are actually saying that, that is creating more racism. It's teaching people that you have to look at that. And it's just, I'm so fed up with it. I've had so many race conversations about this whole thing on my show because they won't stop talking about it, and
No.
I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah.
I grew up in an era of well, I all of my schooling that I was in, like there was people of all different skin colors, and there were cool people of all different skin colors, and there were bullies and assholes of every skin color, and I'd never equated anything to skin color. It was always, oh, you're that type of person, okay, that was it. Just because of that's the type of person you are. Martin Luther King, he talks about like have they even none of these people, like, did you ever talk about him at all in when you were an SJW? Did they reference him at all?
They do,
I'm
and
curious.
they are. I think at some.
How?
Well, they select which
Of
words of
course.
his they use, of
Yeah,
course,
of
and
course.
then they try and they use words as tools to manipulate, and
Yeah.
so one of the things they'll do is they have a lot of different phrases to stop conversation and to stop you from having any dialogue or across this ideological barrier.
Yeah.
And so if you say, well, didn't Martin Luther King, isn't his most famous line about
Yeah.
judging people by the content of their character? And then
Mhm.
they'll say, keep his name out of your mouth.
What?
Yes, you don't get to quote him. They try and gatekeep who gets to quote him, who gets to speak
Wow.
about him, and they
That
won't
in
engage with
itself
that. Yeah.
is a huge red flag,
Yes.
right? I mean, that that is basically saying you can't talk about this amazing American that made incredible advances and in actually breaking oppression that was real in this country, and he made huge strides and taught nonviolence
Hmm.
and looking at who someone was on the inside. Like that's I love that. Like
Yeah.
I want to talk about that more. If you tell
Yeah.
me I can't, I want to scream it louder because clearly they're missing the point.
Yeah. He's
Wow.
really, I just watched a documentary, well, not just, a few
Hmm.
months ago, probably now. I watched a documentary about him and the FBI, and there was something really interesting in it, or a couple of interesting things. One was that in the version of history I learned about him, is
Yeah.
in the social justice world anyway, they don't talk a lot about his faith, which was actually a big part of what he was doing and what he was talking about.
Okay.
They also don't talk about his human failings and his many affairs. and,
Yep.
they also, I never really got one of the important things I think he did was that he was a cultural force to be reckoned with. He wasn't a political force, and
Hmm.
that's why the FBI was watching him in that and his ties to some known communists. But they were watching him and they were trying to intimidate him. And at one point, the FBI wrote him an anonymous letter pretending to be a black guy in his audience, and they were like trying to get him to kill himself. And they were
Wow.
saying, yeah, we're going to release, this is all public knowledge now, but they're like, we're going to release, we know about your affairs. I know about your affairs. I'm very disappointed in you as a black man. I'm going to release all this information if you don't kill yourself. The FBI wrote that to him
Wow.
because he was such a cultural force to be reckoned with. And I think that shows that, that Andrew Breitbart quote about how politics is downstream from culture.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
know that culture is the most important thing to control. If they can shift culture first, politics will follow. And that's what happened with woke.
Yeah.
They put it in the universities first. They put it into the culture. They created little social justice warriors like myself who went out into all these different fields and took it with them. And then the Democratic Party got on board. But it wasn't the other way around. It was they changed the culture,
Who's
then the
they? You keep
politics.
saying they. Who is the head of this SJW snake? Right? Is there a head? Like who's driving this movement?
It's Ibram X. Kendi. I'm kidding. He's not. there's a. There's not. That's one reason that it's hard, I think, for people to identify it as a cult
Yeah.
because we are so used to culturally, we talk about cults in terms of people who have a charismatic leader. Well, that's
Yeah.
just one. That's just one characteristic of a cult, and it's not always there.
Right.
The other characteristics of a cult do apply. It silences dissent. Questions are not allowed. They encourage you to isolate yourself from non-believers. So you're supposed to cut off friends and family because they're bigoted, right? And you cut them off if they're Trump voters or what have you. And I did that I created an echo chamber of just the people who were social justice around me.
Yeah.
If you leave, you're basically excommunicated and treated as a heretic. So there's a lot of these cult characteristics. They focus on language. They come up with new words, like cults do.
Hmm.
But that it doesn't have one charismatic leader, and I think that's why it's hard for us to talk about it in terms of being a cult, because it's more like one of my friends on YouTube. She's called Embarrassing Mom, Gracie West. She calls them the high priests and priestesses of the movement. So she was also a social justice warrior for 20 years, and we were talking about this, and she's like, they don't have one leader. They have lots of different leaders,
Yeah.
and they're always tearing one another down. So then there's new ones that rise up. But if you look currently to who's doing a lot of like the leading, it would be people like Ibram X. Kendi, Robin DiAngelo, the ones who are sort of becoming more of the face of the movement.
Just grifting off of it, really.
Yeah.
I see it almost as if it's like a snowball rolling down a hill, right? That no one really, I mean, it was just like one little snowflake started rolling and a couple others, and it from a distance, you look at it, it's like an Ouroboros uh
Yeah.
with a bunch of snakeheads. After a while, like, it was just a little tiny snowflake at one point, but now it's this like massive thing throughout like the decades, getting bigger and bigger, because we talked about this on your show, like the lack of purpose in people's lives. We don't have to farm anymore. We don't have to like take care of all of these actual important things to live as human beings. So now all of that has been taken away. Now people are looking for ways to fill their lives with purpose and to feel like they're making a difference. That and not everyone can easily find something outside of being told what to do. So they latch onto this, especially because it has such a look how virtuous we all are. Come,
Yes.
come with us and be virtuous with us, because this is the
Yes.
way to be a good human being,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, well, I agree that not being racist is being a good person, right? But you're being very racist, by the way, like in the way
Yeah.
you're doing this. So I don't
Yeah.
agree with what you're doing. They're like, whoa, we found the white supremacist. Like,
You know
wow.
what you're making me think of?
Hmm.
It's like they're virtue signaler. We call it virtue signaling, right? When they're
Oh yeah.
saying these things so they can be thought of by as a good person by everyone around them.
Hmm.
It's in the Bible. There's like the OG virtue signalers, the
Okay.
Pharisees, and they would stand on the street corners, and Jesus called them out. He's like, they would stand on the street corners and pray where they could be seen praying,
Ah,
so that they were known to be, good people. And the
right.
social justice people are the same. They're like,
Totally.
please witness me performing how good I am.
Yeah. Is anyone
Um,
looking? No one's looking. All right, I'm gonna give up. I'm gonna go to another street corner. That's interesting. Yeah, they really need to be seen in what they're doing, or else it's pointless to them,
yes.
right?
If a social justice warrior puts a black square on their profile in the forest and there's no one there to see it, did they really do it?
Yeah, right. Or a Ukrainian flag now is the
Yes.
new thing, or the picture of them vaccinating their children. I mean, there's all these
Yeah.
examples from just the past 2 years alone. It feels like um, the the snowball has finally just landed and just splashed onto everything, and people are realizing, they're like, oh, it's all over me. Like, I can't get away from it. I go to the store, it's everywhere. It's on all the products. They got rid of Aunt Jemima, but kept, and they got rid of all the minorities. I know, it's just randomly popped in my head, but all of them
Yeah.
except all of the white people.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if now they can use that as an example.
Yes.
Well, look at all the products. It's only white. Well, that's because you guys complained that they were using minorities who didn't care that they were being used. Now suddenly there's only white people on products or fruit or animals.
Yeah. They create the world they want, and they want a world with racial division.
Yeah, it's true.
I say they, but right now I'm speaking in generalities. I mean the ideology as a whole.
Yeah.
I'm not discounting the fact that there are people in it who don't realize what it really is, or
Yeah.
who maybe just haven't examined it. They're kind of unconsciously moving
So
along with it.
on that note, right? You said yourself, like, you cut the other people out of your lives, right? You created your echo chamber. So those people that you're talking about right there, they've done that. How is it possible to break into their echo chamber and be like, hey, by the way, uh, it's really racist in here. You know what I mean? Like, is it possible? Like, how, I love finding a way to make a difference in a positive manner. Like, that's really what I feel like having conversations like this are really important. But I feel like even my chat, like, I love my chat. I feel like my chat agrees with a lot of the things that I say, especially right now where I see a lot of people, like, they were, calling out SJWs because it is annoying, because they live in this whole fantasy bubble, which isn't reality, right?
Yeah.
And for most people, I find that they see that reality that they live in, and they're like, okay, well, I don't want to live there, right? But how do you get into that little echo chamber and be like, please look at the truth of the matter?
I think that's a great question. I think that for most people, it's the individuals that you know in your real life, because you're going to have the best chance with those people anyway because they already have a relationship with you. And
Yeah.
so if you have a family member or a loved one or someone who starts to get very woke, which has happened to a lot of people in the past 4 years as it went mainstream,
Mm-hmm.
they may cut you off. But I, the people I've talked to who've come out of it, they said there was this one guy I talked to. He cut his dad off. He got woke in college. He cut his dad off. He started calling his dad a racist, and he had implicit bias, right? He had
Of
a
course.
white privilege, all these things, and he said his dad never gave up loving him. And it's not a matter of making yourself small and not challenging them. You should challenge them, but in a loving way. And the way that looks, I think, is sort of, it's not a list of facts and figures and convincing them that you're right. That's going to turn them off. It turns people off. It would turn you off. If anybody who comes at you and is like, here's all the ways in which you're wrong, and watch this video and read this,
Reminds me
and
of something. I've been there before.
yeah, it shuts you down. And
Yeah.
so his dad, he said, would challenge him and would
Well,
say, well,
hold on. I gotta
oh
say
yeah,
though, it didn't shut me down. It lit a fire under my ass to actually be informed
that's
because
good.
I didn't like being told I was wrong, and I wanted to be able to prove it in when
Yeah,
I was in that situation. But not everyone handles it that way. So
true. I think most people maybe don't. I think most people go to, there's a book that I talked about a lot because it impacted me a lot. It was Jonathan Haidt's The Righteous Mind.
yeah,
Why good people are divided by politics and religion. And in that book, he describes the way in which we usually make up our mind. Most humans, he's like, you can think of your mind like a rider on an elephant, and the rider is your rational mind, and the elephant is your emotional mind. And we all like to think that our rider is guiding things, our rational mind is making it up. He's like, but actually, it's your elephant. Your elephant is making most of your decisions for you, and then your rational mind is kind of, your rider is kind of backwards trying to justify. And
yeah,
so I think that's true for most people, is you have to reach them emotionally before you can reach them rationally. You have to open their heart and open their mind with that emotion before they'll listen, especially social justice people. They tend
true.
to be very emotional.
Well, and their elephants are charging in one
Yes.
direction, so it's like, how do you first off, how does one person riding an elephant themselves change the direction of the elephant easily? It's not easy, let alone, hey, your elephant's going the wrong way. Like,
Yeah.
can they even hear you? Because there's an elephant
Yeah.
charging through the forest. I love that analogy. It really is accurate. I see it very
I,
vividly.
I also think it's important to distinguish, like roughly speaking, I think there's two groups. within social justice. There's the bad actors and there's the useful tools. That's what I've heard Brett Weinstein call them before.
Hmm.
The bad actors are the ones who, in my own words, they're the ones who it doesn't matter. Nothing's going to reach them. They're in there to gain power,
Yep.
money, fame, followers, virtue points, whatever. They're just terrible people. They are consumed by something terrible, and they're using it because they want to be the ones oppressing. That's
Yep.
it.
Yeah, like that Black Lives Matter leader woman who bought
Yes.
like 5 mansions. It's like,
Yes, I do not think
you
she's
bought
sincere.
5 mansions. Like, what?
Yeah, you're
Or
a
4,
hypocrite.
if I'm
Yeah.
trying to be accurate. It was 4 mansions. Sorry. Like, wow.
But then there's the people who are in it who are useful tools and are sincere for the
Yep.
most part and are in it with good intent. A lot of times when I talk to people whose college age kids have been pulled into it and they're like, I don't know what to do. I get letters from people who are like, how can I talk to my college daughter? She has such a good heart. She has such a big heart. And I'm like, yeah, that's why this is
That's why
that's
it
why
worked.
this is taking advantage of her. Yes. And
Yep.
so those are the ones I think about. If I'm talking to the bad actors, I use humor, mocking. It's really only worthwhile to engage with them if there are other people, the good actors who might be watching or people on the
Right.
fence,
To see
um,
it.
to see it because those
Yeah. To
people, you're
bring it
not going to
out.
change them. But try and figure out if it's a person who has good intent or bad, I would say. And if they have
Yeah.
good intent, I do think I know people like that who've changed and who've left. I've had people, the one girl in particular I'm thinking of, she's a good friend of mine now. She started watching my podcast, like hate watching me. She told me, she saw that I was on the local news because there was a BLM thing here in my town square. And this woman had a sign that said, silence is violence. It's one of the social justice sayings. Silence
Oh,
is
yeah.
violence. I hate that sign. I hate that saying. It's a lie.
I
It's a
agree.
lie. And what they're trying to do with that lie is they're trying to equate silence and violence, words and violence, so they can justify using actual violence against words they don't like. They're
Yeah.
trying to get us to a place in society where we view speech or the lack of speech as something violent, and it's an evil sign. And
Wow.
the people that carry that sign, they don't even believe it, because if they did, they don't view silence as violence because they don't want you to be silent about the sign. If you say something like, okay, I'm not going to be silent, I don't agree with your sign, they'll
Right.
yell at you to shut up. I
Right.
thought silence was violence.
Right. That's
Right?
interesting.
So
I never saw it that way, but
they're
you're right.
liars.
Yeah, they really are. I mean, look at the rioting and looting that went down in 2020, the Summer of Love. When it was they called it the Summer of Love. It's like, wow,
Wow.
people were getting
Yeah.
killed uh that whole summer, and it's shocking what
Yeah.
was going on there.
But I saw that sign. I challenged the woman who was carrying it. I was like, that sign's a lie. She started screaming at me, and then the local news came over and wanted to interview us separately. So I was really nervous, but I talked to the news. I was trying to explain my thoughts on silence is violence.
Yeah.
And this girl found in my local town, like saw me in a group. We have a local group on Facebook, and they preemptively blocked me from the group, and then so I couldn't say anything. And then they shared the news clip and said what a horrible person I was. And so she found me that way, and she came and started watching our show just to hate me. And what happened with her over time was that she said, I started to realize I liked you.
Yeah.
I thought I might like you if I knew you. And isn't that amazing?
Yeah,
And
it's
now,
incredible.
yeah, she's complete. And she was a person who was in it sincerely. She believed it. She
Yeah.
believed she had this white privilege she needed to divest herself of, this straight privilege. She is now someone who is truly the open-minded person that she thought she was back then.
Yeah. That's wonderful. What a
Yeah.
great story. I hope more of that happens in this world, because we need it. We need people to recognize what being authentic is, and what actual virtue is. Not signaling virtue, but what real virtue is. um, which is basically what you did. You weren't going to the news and saying how much you didn't like the sign. You went to the person holding the sign and said, I want to explain to you why that's wrong, right? And then of course the news came to you, which is good because that actually set in motion the whole events that turned that one person you're talking about
Yeah.
on the right path to be like, huh, wow,
Yeah.
it's good.
And now
It's
I have this
yeah.
great friend. She was at my wedding.
Oh,
She used to hate watch me, and now
oh,
she's at
you
my
guys are like legit, like
yeah.
friend. That's awesome. I
Isn't
love
that
that.
funny? It's
That's
like,
a
okay.
great story. No, I love that. Yeah, that's right there is a shining example of um actually doing good in the world, which is what I see you doing now, because especially because you have the experience of being in it. Like you were in there, you were
Mhm.
ingrained in the SJW culture, so you really do understand it. Now there's this push with the whole like trans movement and sexual identity. I mean, is it one and the same with the
Yes.
SJW culture? I mean, when did that come about?
So the the best way I think to think about it is I'm going to give you the way I social justice for dummies, like for me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hold on one second. You know what? I'm going to try and switch my camera and see if this is better.
Okay, sure.
You tell me. Is that better?
Oh, it's different. I think the other one was a little better,
Okay, we'll go
a little
back.
clean, a little cleaner of an image.
Okay. If I disappear.
Is it gonna die? Is it gonna die?
No, it's
It.
just going to get darker here, but that's
Oh,
okay.
okay, that's fine.
Um, so the best way I think to think about it is that if you take, people have compared it to Marxism. And
Right.
so if you look at Marxism as an ideology that said the best way to look at the world is as a struggle for wealth among class groups, right?
Okay.
And we need to redistribute wealth so all these class groups can be equal. And so they called the oppressors had a lot of wealth, the oppressed didn't, and so we want to equalize everything through force, through the government, right? Social justice ideology is Marxism mutated. It's basically, it says the best way to look at the world is as a struggle for power among identity groups.
Right.
And we need to redistribute power based on race and sex and sexuality. And so it's like they took the architecture of Marxism and then they changed what it was focused around, but the architecture is the same.
Yeah.
And so I think of it also like an umbrella where it just pulls in because it's about redistributing power among identity groups. It latches onto and pulls in all these different identity groups and almost uses them like puppets. And
Yeah.
so it's
To gain
pulled in.
power.
Right. So I came in, there's lots of doors. I came in through the feminist door, the women's door, we're oppressed. There's the race door, there's the sexuality door, now there's the
All the
trans
same.
door, the fat
Whatever.
door. There,
Everything.
yeah,
Name
there's the
something.
mental illness door. They have mental health justice now, it's like they're constantly pulling in these different groups of identity and
Yeah.
then sucking them into the belief system. And that's why they all start to speak the same thing. That's why if someone supports critical race theory, it's very likely they also support transing kids
Yeah.
because they're under that big umbrella of social justice.
What annoys me about that is these people don't realize that there's for every type of personality there is. I'm talking personality, not what your gender is, your skin color is, what you identify as, like none of that. Like personalities, right? Like who a person is on the inside. There's every different kind of race, that same kind of personality for every different personality. Same goes with gender. Same goes with all these mental disorders. Like there's, people. How do I even sum this up? So like in high school, you have all the different clique groups. The goths, the jocks, the geeks, the nerds, the all the different types of people there are in the world, right? It feels like there's probably a fat version of each of them. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
or the fat door or the feminist door, like any one of these doors. So it's almost like they're just collecting the victim versions of each of these people,
Yes.
because the victims are like, well, I well, and there's a lot to this, right? Because like, what makes a victim? It's a person that remains a victim. So they since they're remaining a victim, they want to blame someone else, and it gives all of these people someone to blame. Here's this. This is your answer. I've got an answer for you. It's this. It's this person. It's their fault. So join our fight to bring that person down, instead of realizing that, hey, everyone has the power to actually, further themselves if they work for it. Unless you're an actual victim, and you can't, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't exist for these people. They have to
No.
create themselves to be victims.
Totally.
Um, it's uh, it's it's really sad.
But think about what that does to people too, because within the ideology, you get social credit based on how oppressed you are,
Right.
based on how much of a victim you are, and so people are now creating new victim classes that they want to be a part of, and
Yep.
they're staying in things that are not healthy. So for example, you will see on Twitter now in their bios, they always list all their groups, right? So like, I am a black, queer, disabled,
Neurodivergent.
neurodivergent, borderline personality, and fat, and so when something that is negative becomes a part of your identity, like being borderline or
Right.
having depression or being fat or being, then you're encouraged to stay there because now you
True.
see it as who you are.
Right. And it's empowering in a way. And it's like,
Yeah.
no,
No.
some of those things can't be helped. Like if you actually have mental health issues, like that sucks, but you should seek health and help instead of glorifying it and staying there.
Yeah.
Um, it is definitely a problem with society where people are glorifying the wrong thing. They're not focused on furthering themselves, which in turn is holding humanity as a whole back. In Where's humanity going to go if everyone's focused on what's wrong with them as a virtue? Like, oh
Yeah.
wow, like great, well have fun with that. We're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, China's over there teaching its kids to be scientists and exploring the dark side of the moon, and prepping to basically claim ownership over the moon. I don't know if you know that they're really
I did
going
not
to
know
do
that.
that. Yeah, they want to claim the moon for themselves, even though it falls under maritime rules. They're like, yeah, well, what are you going to do about it? You're too busy cutting your dicks off and trying to you know out victim each other.
Yeah. I used to joke about, my mind's still from the comedy world. I'll still have sketch ideas that I think would be funny. I want to
Hmm.
do some of these one day, but I
You
think
should.
if SNL were still funny, it would have a sketch where World War III is happening and the bombs are falling and you're in a bomb shelter and they're arguing about gender neutral bathrooms.
See, now that's funny. But that
Right?
wouldn't work on SNL because SNL stopped being funny 20 years ago.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah, the last vestige of SNL. It's sad because I grew up watching SNL, and SNL was hilarious when I was a kid. I remember dying many Saturday nights, but yeah, it's is it too spicy? No, I don't care. I don't even think it's that spicy. I think people need to be faced with reality, and that because they don't want to face reality. And we've built a culture where they don't have to face reality, right? I mean,
Yeah.
reality smacks you in the face, like true reality. When you run out of food, when you don't have money to like get your basic needs taken care of, suddenly reality becomes all too clear. We live in a world where we have fat homeless people, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
mm, you're eating pretty good. You're eating still better than most of the planet, and you go to a store and get water whenever you want. Like you don't have it bad. You think you're oppressed. People in the West think they're oppressed. They need to leave the West for a second and just go
It's what you
anywhere
were
else.
saying. Yeah, and when you were on Deprogrammed and you were talking about if you experience microaggressions, you probably never experienced a macro
Macro
aggr-
danger. Yep.
macro danger there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly. They don't. They don't know what a macro danger is. They've never faced it. You would ask them, you know what a macro danger is? Oh, all the time. I get it all. Someone misgendered me. Like,
Yes.
I said macro danger, not a microaggression. Anyone who complains about microaggressions are weak-minded, because they've fallen prey to the virtuous SJW culture. Like, no offense, because you fell prey to it too, but you came around. You realized that it was a cult. I mean, it is a cult.
It is a cult. I call it that. It
Yeah,
meets, if you go down look up a cult checklist and go down and see which criteria it meets,
yeah.
the lack of a charismatic leader is not enough for me to exclude it from that category because it
Cult
meets a lot of
checklist.
the other.
See here. All right, I got a list here. Let's read them here. The group is focused on a living leader. Okay, so no,
Not that
that's the
one.
first one. That's fine. Next, the group is preoccupied with bringing in new members. Well, that's a huge one.
Yes.
Uh, the group is preoccupied with making money. I mean, look at Black Lives Matter. They
Yes.
raised $1 billion in 2020, and
Yes.
how much? It was like something like 80 million actually went to helping Black communities. That's insane. The discrepancy there is huge. Let's see.
Hey, I'll jump in there for a second.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
One other thing they do that's pretty funny is they have all these phrases they make up, right? And I don't know if you've seen this one. I don't know how far you've been in the cult, but if you ask them to explain something to you, they will sometimes say, "Well, you need to pay me for my emotional labor. Here's my tip
Seriously?
jar." Yes.
Seriously?
Yes.
Wow. That's not surprising. That's not surprising. The grift is real. Let's see. Next one. Questioning, doubt, and dissent are discouraged and or even punished. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
All right. Mind numbing techniques such as meditation, chanting, speaking in tongues, denouncing sessions, debilitating work routines are used to suppress doubts about the group and its leaders. Yep.
So,
Like you were saying.
yeah, did you see those videos back when one of the other acceleration points was after George Floyd, and then we started to see all these videos where they were
Oh my gosh.
engaging in what Christians would call liturgy.
I'm
They were like,
sorry
say their name. Yeah.
I'm sorry for being me. Let me wash your feet. They washed their feet. It's like,
Hmm.
what's that doing? Other
It's
than demeaning you.
it's ritual.
It's ritual. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, exactly. Checking it off the list. The next one is about the leadership, but let's read it. It says the leadership dictates something in great detail how members should think, act, and feel. So, like you said earlier, it's almost like there's a bunch of different leaders,
Hmm.
and they're all prying at each other, trying to be the leader, trying to do exactly this. Though, still,
Yeah.
it's like you're still hearing. You know what the leader is? The group as a whole is the
Yeah.
leader, right? Is like, to really get rid of this, to get rid of the leader, everyone has to kind of disperse, and that, how do you make that happen, right? And it doesn't.
It doesn't. You're not going to take down the leader and then take down the cult. It's actually much harder to combat than something like a traditional, what we think of as a cult. Like the Manson family had one leader, right?
Yeah.
And this is different. There's always another head, and they all speak the same. They do dictate all the rules of how you
Right.
behave. And everybody in it knows the rules, and you start to have a little ruler in your head, a little social justice person in your head that's like, anytime you're typing anything online or speaking to your friends, you have this internal censor of like, okay, which words can I use and which words can I not use? And I want to make sure I don't trip over any invisible wires about, like spirit animal was an example I think I gave you before.
Right.
Spirit animal's racist, so I can't use that. And yeah,
So
they have
silly.
a whole list.
So silly, the spirit animal. Well, what if someone identifies as a spirit animal? Hmm? I mean, no, they're out of the club, I guess.
Out of the club,
That
tripped a
sucks for
wire.
them. That sucks for them. This list is actually a lot longer than I thought. There's a lot, and it really does feel like they're hitting it right on the head. The nail is just being crushed by this. What was that flash? That was weird. My screen flashed there for a second. But you know what? Let's. I want to just talk. What are you doing now? You know, we've enough about this. I mean, obviously, you're still in the world of. You're not in the SJW world, but you're in this new podcasting realm, kind of speaking out. What are you doing now? I know you have your new podcast. I happened to be on it just recently, a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. So Deprogrammed is my new channel. If you guys haven't followed that one, I was on Unsafe Space for 3 years and just launched Deprogrammed this year, it's actually a series I was doing on Unsafe Space. So now it's on my own channel. And then we have a couple of others, one that we've already started called Pop Culture with my friend Chris, where we try and focus on not just the bad woke stuff and entertainment, but also some of the positive stuff. And the reason I started doing Deprogrammed was when I started coming out of it, I was still trying to figure out, there's so much you can say about this ideology and what it is. And I was
Right.
trying to figure out how I got sucked into it, how people get sold on it being the opposite of what it is, and what is it really? And I had just had so many questions, and so I started doing interviews with people who had left social justice, people who had maybe changed their opinion on some things, people who were some professors. I got to talk to Brett Weinstein,
Cool.
James Lindsay, Dr. William Allen, who's a historian. He's brilliant. And so just trying to examine social justice from every angle. And then most recently, I got to interview Jack Buckby, who's a former white nationalist. And that was interesting.
Wow.
I'd never interviewed someone who had left that cult before. And just to find out where our experiences overlapped and where they were different was very interesting. So
Yeah.
that's what Deprogrammed is. And I would say the way I got started doing that was when I finally decided to leave the woke.
Yeah.
It was a long process.
When was that?
And it was in 2016, 2017.
Okay.
And I was still working in entertainment. I had moved to Texas, but I was still working with social justice comedians. I was in the middle of developing another social justice comedy series with a comedian I represented. And the process of pitching a series is so long. It had been a 2-year process from when we had written the pilot and written all the episode summaries. You know, then you go and you try to attach people or production companies. So then we attached Lionsgate, and then we finally, that whole process of getting it to a network who said, yes, we will pay you to make the pilot. Let's see if we like it. That was 2 years. And so
Wow.
I was flying back to LA to shoot that pilot that I no longer believed in. And I was questioning, and I'm like, I don't actually know if I want to be part of a show that's questioning isms, a comedy show that's questioning isms. And I'm starting to think that this ideology is the opposite of what it says it is, and I don't have a good feeling about it. And so I was trying to figure out what was going to happen if it went to series. Would I stay on or not? And fortunately, that decision was out of my hands because they didn't like the pilot. so they didn't go to series. Yeah,
Well,
and then after that, I had written a letter to Jordan Peterson when I was trying to figure things out, because his videos really impacted me like they have a lot of people.
Yeah.
And
Which ones? Just all of them? Maps of Meaning?
No, at that time it was an old video of his. Well, I found him because somebody in my echo chamber was like, look at this transphobe, blah, blah, blah. And I went there expecting to hate him and think he was a transphobe. And I came away saying, wait a minute, this guy is helping
Guy's amazing.
He's amazing. I was like, he's not a transphobe at all. He's talking about compelled speech. And so I started looking at some of his other stuff, and he had a video called Tragedy versus Evil. And in that video, there was so much in it that helped me understand things better. He talked about the Cain and Abel story in the Bible being an allegory for 2 different ways of being in the world, and how if you're behaving like Cain, you're behaving from a place of resentment and entitlement and arrogance and grievance and not making the necessary sacrifices. And if you're behaving like Abel, it's the opposite way of being. It's with gratitude and with humility and thankfulness and making sacrifices for what you want out of life. And I started to think about that a lot. And I was like, wow, my whole belief system social justice is really a resentment-based belief system.
Yeah.
it tells you to carry around this chip on your shoulder, like you were saying, Adam. Everything's the fault of something exterior. It's all the
Yep.
fault of the world. I'm especially aggrieved. And so that really, I'd written him a letter, and he ended up reading the letter on his YouTube channel,
Cool.
which scared the shit out of me, because I was like, I was still in the closet and I was still working in entertainment, and
Oh.
I was thinking he had
Uh-oh.
changed some identifying factors, but I really was like, oh my gosh, they're gonna find out. And I wrote to him and told him, I was afraid, and he said, you have to get over your fear. And it was another 6 months after that until I finally came out of the closet. Is like, I wrote an essay called on leaving the social justice cult and finding
Yeah.
myself, and that was me basically trying to talk to people who were friends of mine who were still in it and explain what was happening with me, because so many of them were either writing me off, or
Yep.
one friend flew to Texas and tried to have an intervention with me. And
Wow.
yeah, she was like, you're leaving, you're not just leaving the tribe. People perceive that you're attacking the tribe and you'll never be able to come back. And it was like, okay, I think it's a pretty bad tribe. Like, I don't,
Yeah. I don't want to go back.
like, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Wow.
I just want to be a nomad for a while. Can I do that? Like,
Right.
but that kind of set me on that journey of trying to figure out what it was I had been in for 2 decades. And it was so, and that's a long process. I identify a
Yeah.
lot with identify. I hate that word now, but documentaries about cults and stuff really resonate with me now, because I can understand some of it's similar, some of it's not. So, but I watch a lot
Let me
of
just
cult
remind you
docs.
though, they don't own words. All right, so
Yeah,
you
that's
you
true.
can identify with something. That's fine.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
try something, Adam. Let's
Sure.
see.
Try it out.
Does that help?
Your lighting's fine.
Okay.
It
I'm
was a
sorry.
little dim from earlier. No, don't be sorry. It's good. The conversation is really what's important here. You know, I really it's been good getting to know your story, because we've met multiple times, and we've had really great conversations about stuff, but I never really heard your story
Yeah.
about what you've been through. I just want to let everyone know who's listening right now, in the description below, you can find her new YouTube channel and Deprogrammed, also her website and her Twitter page. Definitely go give her a follow, and give her a sub as well. That she's obviously fantastic. You can hear. I have a bunch of super chats I'd like to read. I know
Okay.
if you're down to chill and hang
Yeah.
out.
Let's do it. I can't see
First,
them, so read the good
that's
ones.
no, of course. No, I read them all. I read them all. So don't worry, good or bad. Robert Wild says, "I hope this makes Betty smile and Diana Francisco smile. I'm doing better. It's not easy some days, but you have all helped. Be blessed." Well, good to know that there are still good days, Robert. And then, of course, he says, Crigler coffee #1. I do love coffee. Do you like coffee? Are you a coffee
I
drinker?
love coffee. I'll have to get your coffee.
It's the best coffee you can get. I mean, I am obviously biased, but a lot of people, I mean, Robert Wiles just said Crigler coffee #1. Here's a good question, actually. I'm curious if you have an answer to it. This is from The Last Crow. It says, why do so many SJWs color their hair with Kool-Aid? What is up with that?
I think I think part of it is, in any sort of tribe, to use a
Mm,
word that my friend used,
yeah,
people want to identify themselves, as so you know what they think ahead of time. And there has a lot of social justice people have come to adopt the brightly colored hair as a way of symbolizing what they believe. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody with that hair believes that, but for the
right.
most part, it's almost become a shorthand now, where they're signaling what cult they're in, and it's unfortunate for people who do have beautiful brightly colored hair who are not in that cult, because sometimes you do that shorthand thing when you see them and you're like, oh, I'm probably,
Uh-oh, they got
yeah,
pronouns in their bio.
yeah. I think it's also because part of the feminist part of social justice is, a lot of it is about challenging patriarchal gender norms.
Yeah,
And so they
true.
want to destroy what is considered to be traditional standards of beauty. That's also why they say that fat is healthy and that we should celebrate all body types. And it there's a difference between saying don't treat someone like shit when they're
Good
fat
point.
and
Right, right,
saying
right.
pretend like being fat is healthy. Those are two different things.
Right. Or
Um,
you it's okay to say to someone, "I want you to live longer. So
mhm.
I want you to be healthy and being fat is not healthy." And it's like, "Whoa, whoa. This is beautiful. All of this is beautiful. You will love this." And it's like,
Yes.
or you're unhealthy and you're actually setting precedents for other people to be okay with being unhealthy, and that's not okay.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
They
Yeah,
also,
that
one last thing on that, because I have a lot of thoughts
Sure.
on it.
Yeah,
They
yeah, yeah.
also,
Get it
I
out.
think they mistake a lot. Social justice people tend to mistake, well, first of all, they're multiple identities. They mistake that for having a personality. That's why they
Right.
rattle it all off, you know? They're like, oh,
Right.
this is my personality. I am white, cisgender, da 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 da. That's not a personality. That's just a
No, it's
list
not.
of characteristics. And so they
Right.
also mistake, I think, brightly colored hair, some of them, for again, for having a personality, or let me show you how edgy I am and how much I don't conform. And it's like, yeah, well, within your tribe, you're really conforming. It's like you have a
Yeah.
uniform.
They don't
Right.
get it though. They just
No.
don't see it. It's really sad. Oh, that's funny. Vitamin D for me said for 10, thank you, says I feel like SJW rhetoric is a modern and small pill to swallow version of apartheid. Thoughts? Hmm. I mean, they are the most racist out there, aren't they not? I mean, they're I don't see racism outside of the SJW culture, man. They really do feel like they are trying to split us all up and divide us via those personalities, according to them.
Yeah. They have the most influence currently
Yeah,
of any racist belief system.
yeah,
They're mainstreamed. It's not a bad thing to be considered social justice in the mainstream.
yeah. Well, we should change. Hopefully that changes. Bryson Gray, what's good, Bryson? Just dropped $50. Thank you so much. He simply says, "God bless." Thank you very much, Bryson. I appreciate that a lot. Gotta love Bryson Gray. If you know Bryson, don't
Is
you?
he a musician?
He is. Yes.
Okay. I know his
Yeah.
name.
He's a one of the only Christian rappers out there that is banned to oblivion because they don't like hearing um, his bold voice. I mean, I think he is probably the most unapologetic person on the internet, and I love that about him. He does not change what he thinks for anyone, um, and I respect the crap out of that. He's great.
That's cool.
So thank you, Bryson. I really appreciate it. You should have him on your show. Actually, I think that would be a really good conversation. Yeah,
I would look him up.
yeah, definitely. Let's see. Sejong. Hey, wow, another $50. Thank you very much, Sejong. Happy belated birthday, Adam. Thank you very much. To answer your questions, they are socialists who put social in social justice. They have been infiltrating education and media since the early 1920s. If you need to understand their methods, ask Yuri Bezmenov, who was absolutely right. Bryson, I am doing well. Thank you very much. I see you in chat. Um, yeah, you're right. Yeah, socialists, Marxists, they're all kind of one and the same, right? I mean, see what I also I was going to add this earlier, but you were in the middle of a story. I didn't want to interrupt. You know, a lot of these people don't understand that there are different, like within personality types, there's still even different people. Like we could be very similar and have very similar personalities, but I could be lazy and you can be really uh, uh, like a go-getter, right? You can have all of this desire to further yourself and be successful, and then but you guys can two people could be almost identical in personalities but have
Yeah.
completely drastic different motivations in life, right? I mean, it's and that's just two people. Like imagine like all these different people in the world, you know, they're not, you could be a fat person over here and fat person over here, and one person's like, I'm going to work to get healthy, and the other person's like, I am healthy. What are you talking about? You know, I
Yeah.
don't know, there's so many different examples of this, but when you equalize power, it never can be equalized because there's always going to be someone who wants to seek power, and there's always going to be someone who's like, I don't really care. It doesn't,
Yeah.
you know, power, meh. And then there, boom, suddenly someone has power over them, you know?
There's what you're saying is statistically also proven that there's more intra-group difference than there is between groups. So
Yeah,
meaning like there's more of a range within, let's say, the group woman than there is between, on average, men and women. Like if you
right.
take the average man and the average woman, they're going to have more in common than if you just pick two random women.
Interesting. Well, they don't take that into account. It's like these people think that there's this utopia where everyone will think the same, act the same, do a little bit of work for the global good, or like I mean, it's just not going to be a thing. There's always going to be a lazy person that doesn't want to do any work. So why should they get food and water and whatever when there's someone who's going to work extra hard to provide? um it's just they're not taking that into account. I don't know.
They're
There's so
labor
much.
challenged.
Yeah, there's so many aspects of the SJW culture that you can't just sum it up even with one conversation. Like,
No.
we've been chatting for an hour and 15 minutes about it, and it's like I feel like we're still just kind of like peeling back a little bit and peering in a little bit, right? But the
Yeah.
more it's like a layers of an onion, that you pull back one layer and it reveals like a whole nother issue. Yeah, it's crazy. Bryson, dang, another 50 says, I didn't know I missed your birthday. Happy late birthday, bro. Yes, my birthday was yesterday. Thank you, Bryson. I
Happy
appreciate that.
birthday.
Thank you, Keri. Thank you very much. Yeah, I had a great day yesterday. Spent it with my wife. We were just we went out and about on the town. And I don't know. I always get like this. I don't like attention on my birthday about it. I don't know. Birthdays are weird for me. I love celebrating other people's birthdays, but I don't like celebrating my own. And
Huh.
I don't know what it is about it. I don't mind getting older. I'm very happy. I love my life. I love where I'm at. It's just something about birthdays. I don't know. I mean, I'm just I love making other people feel great on their birthday. It's a lot of fun for me. But leave me alone on mine. That's how it feels. Anyway, thank you, Bryson. I appreciate that. Nico, Keri, how the various SJW groups today are the same as the social justice groups from Occupy Wall Street and the violence they are capable of. I guess how are the various SJW groups today are the
Well,
same?
first of
Yeah.
all, I went to Occupy a couple times. I was working with a comedy group at the time,
Okay.
and we filmed some stuff out there with Occupy Wall Street, and um, I didn't camp there or stay there overnight, but we went there a few times. And I do know people who were a part of Occupy, and the consensus seems to be that Occupy ended because of social justice.
Really?
Yes, it became complete infighting, which is what happens with social justice. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of being united with this one cause, staying united with this one cause, it became about within Occupy, who's more oppressed, who's more marginalized. Let's let the black, queer, half Latinx people talk. It was this whole thing about like, which is what happens in their circles. Every
Yep.
echo chamber they're in, every community they're in, it all becomes about who has more of a microphone, and
Yep.
that's dependent on how oppressed you are based on what groups you're in.
I have the most victim card, the biggest victim
Yeah.
card. That meme is really true. Occupy
Oh,
Wall
it's
Street is the banker. They're outside, and then the next frame, he's just like introduce them to identity politics, and then
Oh,
like
I've never seen that meme, but that's true.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, and it's like well, then it works. Then it works. Yeah, wow. Uh, Robin Savvy Skogland. This is actually my mom. Just super chatted for $20. Mom, what's up? Says Keri, this conversation is dope. Thanks for your insight. Adam, I love you. I love you too, Mom. I love you too. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Adam's mom. That's super cool that your mom super chats.
My mom's that was the second time she's ever chatted me. She has before. But it's rare and it's only on a really good show. So just to let you know. Josh, oh my gosh, for 10 says, "Yo, I had my coworker at McDonald's that would yell Black Power at me sometimes during the BLM stuff last year." That's so weird. Like imagine if if someone yelled white power, right?
Yeah.
It's like it if you switch the color, like that's the thing, right? If you switch the color and it sounds racist, it's probably racist in
Yeah.
general. Like black power, like just human power. Like, oh my gosh, well, no, oh well, not all lives matter because black lives. Yeah, I don't even want to say that they don't matter because that's what it feels like they're trying to convince the world that black lives don't, so that they would that the term Black Lives Matter actually needs to be said. But it's
Yes.
like we all believe that they matter. Like you're not
Yeah.
convincing us that they don't because everyone believes they do. You guys are the only one to seem to think that they don't matter or something. It's
But think about what that does to kids. They're
right.
instilling, especially young black children,
It's a
with
good
this
point.
idea that black lives don't matter. That's what that does. They're creating this boogeyman, this monster that they so desperately want
Yep.
to exist. They're creating segregation now.
Yep.
They're segregating
Exactly.
people.
Exactly. Yep. From it's taught. They're teaching. They're teaching it. Ugh, it's scary. Nico again says Occupy Wall Street on steroids. Yeah, it seems to have just gotten out of hand, right? My goodness. Darth Call, hey, became a member. Hold on, we got a new member, and it's my homie Darth Call. Thank you so much, Call. Let me see for all those members in chat, spinning them UFOs. I want to see them UFOs spinning. I have a mascot. His name is Newport. It's a UFO. And I used to spin it. I have to find the power cord. I haven't looked very hard, I'll be honest. I have more pressing things to deal with, but I will eventually have the UFO back, and it's sitting right here. It's
Do a
ready.
little spin.
It's gonna be sitting like maybe I don't know.
Why?
Well,
Why is that your thing? Are you really into
space.
X-Files?
I love space. I love
Okay.
space. I love the idea that we are living in a time where we could start adventuring into space. I mean, we're planning on going to Mars within the next 10 years. That's insane to me. And that I'm going to be able to witness it. I just love space. I was always into space. In fact, I wanted to join the Air Force to then eventually become an astronaut. Now I'm a YouTuber. that just talks about it, but I love it. But this was actually the UFO that was on the Timcast IRL show that I used to spin, and I actually have
Okay.
the spinner that was on the show. Yeah, I got these in the divorce, so totally love it though. Love it. But seriously, it's been a pleasure to chat with you. I mean, all the times you are here was a lot of fun, and then of course being over on Deprogrammed was a lot of fun. If you guys want to hear our conversation, we had a really great conversation about just purpose and kind of like an extension of what we were talking about today. We were more focused on SJWs. I mean, it did come up while I was on Deprogrammed, but in the description below, you can check out her new channel, Deprogrammed. Keri, I'll give you the camera. Why don't you tell people what I basically just said? And
Yeah. If you guys want to find my new channel, go to the description here. He said he's put the link there. And if you are interested in book club, we're going to be starting up a new book club on the channel. And we're going to be going back and forth between fiction and nonfiction and kind of reading a selection of books that help people better understand cults and cult ideology. So check it out. Thank you.
Very cool. Yeah, very cool. All right. Well, everyone, that was my show. I will be back, of course, tomorrow with 1/8 Wednesday. I'm going to make fun of Garrett about how to actually play a Souls game because he needs some pointers. I don't know if you've watched him on YouTube. He needs some help. So anyway, Keri, thank you very much. You have a wonderful
Thank you,
day. Right?
Adam. Have a good night.
You as well. Good night.